Valorant is constantly changing, and as it changes, it becomes harder and harder to adapt. And right now, this meta is incredibly difficult and sometimes frustrating to succeed in. That's why in this video, we're going to go over 10 tips to dominate this act and new meta. So we're going to break it all down, starting off with the insta-lock meta. So we all know that Chamber got buffed quite a bit, and it made the character a lot more popular. And if you combine that with the fact that a lot of duelists have been buffed really recently, we run into the problem where everyone wants to play a character that is based on fragging. Like in most games, you're going to get a Chamber, a Jet, a Clove, a Reyna, and then maybe a Phil if you're lucky, and everyone's insta-locking. So you're probably between a rock and a hard place. Do you lock with everyone else and join into the fray, or do you try to fill and maybe be that difference maker in another way? The way that you're honestly going to succeed is making sure that regardless of what you pick, you know that you're going to get consistent value on that character. It's really impossible for you to be good at all those characters that we listed, and we often suggest minimizing your agent pool so that you're not playing the entire roster and you're getting better and better at specific characters. That being said, if you have like Jet or Chamber as the character that you made and you know how to play incredibly well, if you see an opportunity, you should never feel guilt about picking those characters. However, if those characters get picked out from under you, that doesn't mean to run or jump to the nearest other option. Just because your Chamber gets picked doesn't mean you run to Jet, and if your Chamber and Jet gets picked doesn't mean you run to Reyna. Oftentimes, you want to play the characters that you know that you're the best in, and if those characters are picked, picking a fill option in that game means that you don't have to play phenomenal and hit all your shots and be perfect in that game to win and carry. You just have to do the fundamental job that your team needs, and you're gonna win because of that. This minimizes the games that you throw and maximizes the games that you carry. But whether you're filling or locking, having great aim means that you can carry no matter what game you're in or what character you're on. And that's why it's so important to develop great aim every single day. But many people learn wrong, don't know how to properly trade, or just can't improve at a fast enough rate. And for that, the SkillCapped website Aim God course has everything you need to develop very quickly. Doesn't matter what rank you're in or how good your aim is now, there's always further you could develop, and great aim is going to mean that you're going to win so much more games, be more consistent in those games, and carry harder than ever. So what are you waiting for? With our money back guarantee, if you don't climb, you don't pay. So check it out right now in the links down below. Now, we did talk about how duelists did get buffed, specifically ISO and Neon, and I'm going to talk about why you should be trying to play this duo more and how you can counter this duo more. So, these characters are insanely difficult right now to deal with in ranked because they play extremely well together, and it's really hard to deal with the things that both these characters do. So, Neon oftentimes is trying to run in and pull fire. Really mess up all the crosshair placement of people holding sites and make it so that Neon is like taking on all the attention, all the aggro, and creating space. But ISO is incredibly strong at capitalizing off that pull of fire. Because he has a shield and he has the means to tank certain amounts of damage, the ISO is going to be able to leverage those moments to way greater effect than a lot of other duelists. And this combo can be really, really effective at taking sites and is incredibly frustrating to deal with. So if you're looking for a duo to run, this can be a really powerful one. But in dealing with this duo, it can be frustrating. So let me give you some tips to do that. A hyper aggressive setup like ISO and Neon are going to be more powerful in taking sites, but less powerful in holding sites. So they're not going to have as much utility as like a sentinel setup or a high initiator setup that can play post plant a lot easier. So oftentimes, if you need to dip out, just apply a little pressure and then dip off the site. This makes the ISO and the Neon commit a lot more utility towards taking that site, and then they're a lot weaker in that post plant environment. In addition to that, you need to understand the tempo that these characters play at. ISO is going to be prone to challenging a lot. ISOs are going to be under a tight timer to take duels with their overshield, so you need to expect them to swing pretty much any situation that they can. Even if it's a 50-50, ISO's going to swing. Sometimes even when it's disadvantaged, ISO's going to swing. So being ready for that aggressive style of play is very, very important. And then Neon is another character that is always trying to mistime you, so you're not safe in places that you normally think that you are safe, right? You're not safe back a site using a drone. You're not safe pushed up to a corner and trying to use a piece of utility. You're going to get caught off by Neon's rotating fast, executing fast, and you need to get used to that pace of play. Be extra careful of places that you don't know 100% that the Neon isn't there. And the last tip I have for you is up against these two characters in particular, the Phantom starts to shine a lot more than the Vandal in most engagements, because the precision fights against the ISO are going to be lost if the ISO hits their shot, and so do you. If you have a Vandal. And against the Neon, not being able to spray control nearly as much is going to be really rough against a character that has really high mobility. In addition to that, getting extra value out of your sprays is easier with the Phantom up against these characters. So if you're having a lot of trouble against these in particular, I would definitely recommend the Phantom. Doesn't mean you can't succeed with the Vandal, but these two characters in particular are a little bit difficult to deal with. Now, number 3 in the meta, Double Sentinel is back, but you need to know how to utilize Double Sentinel and how to set it up if you want the most value. So typically there's 2 ways that you would set up a Double Sentinel setup. You would either hard stack multiple Sentinels on one site, and then you could 3 stack the other. And this is super strong because normally the problem with a Sentinel, right, is they don't want to have to use a piece of utility for the mid cutoff, because if they do that, then they don't have enough utility for sight. But with 2 Sentinels stacking, there's more than enough utility so that one of you can use a piece of utility to deny mid lurk or get information on mid lurk, and you still have plenty of utility for playing on site. So then utility guards mid, 2 Sentinels lock down their site, and then you could hard stack the other site. The other way that you can set this up is you do split Sentinels, where you have 1 Sentinel on one side, 1 Sentinel on the other, and then you have 3 other people act as floaters, where they rotate a lot more aggressively, they lurk through mid, they play a lot more areas, because they know that the Sentinels are going to be able to stall long enough so that they can actually go and interject if they're floating somewhere middle. This means that the Sentinels will actually be getting help much more quickly with rotation, so all a Sentinel has to do on the site they're at is delay just as much as possible. Even just delaying like 10 seconds is enough time for people to come in and rotate in. And from the enemy's point of view, if they're not executing fast enough, they feel like no matter what site they hit, there are people there, multiple people, sometimes 3 or 4 people, and it can be really frustrating. So both of these are really powerful to do, and I would say that the stacking one is a little bit better if you're duoed with that person so that you can communicate, but the floater one tends to be better in most ranks that people don't execute properly enough. So the lower in rank you are, I think it's more powerful, but it can still be done in higher rank too, depending on how good the floaters are. But you might be wondering, how do you take sites? Because attacking can be really hard, and typically on attack with a double sentinel, you're going to be really lurk heavy. You're looking for opportunities to cut off areas of the map, force a rotation into sentinel utility, and shut people down. But you also got to understand that if you can find a moment to take a site, retaking is next to impossible for the enemy team when they have to push in post plant into double sentinels. Really difficult. So there's going to be a lot of rotations, there's a lot of gathering of information, because the win condition is just to take site without all of you dying, right? So you're really methodical. Maybe you'll poke and prod one area of the map, poke and prod the other, gather information here, there, because ultimately once you get that spike down and you're still alive, the enemy are going to have a really difficult time pushing through you. Then number 4, this is a simple tip that I think a lot of people are messing up just in general, but especially in this act. Elephant noise is the calm for making bits of noise that you don't need to make because you think that enemies are in the places towards their spawner on site, right? So like as a common example, let's say you're gonna go rotate off and hit another site. People will run the whole way and then they'll start walking when they get towards main because they think, hey, enemies are on site. We don't want to give them any information that we're gonna hit here because the enemies are on site. But the thing is, you don't have any confirmation that the enemies aren't pushed up. You don't have any confirmation that the enemies aren't playing more aggressive. There's a lot of places on the map that enemies could be that if they were there, they would hear you rotating back. And this is a super common problem where whether you're rotating off to go do a cat hit or rotating off to mid, if you don't anticipate the certain areas where enemies could possibly be at all times, you could be giving a little piece of information away that you just didn't need to. You could have walked a little bit more, maybe walk away from your team and then sprint for a little bit and then walk again because you're playing around enemies potentially being lurked up in this angle or that corner. And the reason that this is important is because how many times have you played Valorant where it felt like you rotated off, you baited out the enemy, and then there's still 3 people there and you're like, what the hell, did they just not rotate off? And the reality of it is you most likely made a small bit of noise that told the enemy you're a play ahead of time, and it's because you didn't play around these set locations. You just don't know if an enemy is there, so you have to assume that they could be. But moving on to number 5, a simple tip that I think everyone needs to start incorporating is clearing sites with intent. Oftentimes players, especially in the lower elos, will just walk in straight lines to clear site, but I want to start seeing you clear corners intentfully. This means instead of walking in a straight line through site, you are left to right or right to left challenging one corner, and then you're challenging another, and then you're challenging another. The idea is that as you're pushing onto site, you're almost zigzagging. You're not necessarily walking in a straight line at all. You're zigzagging this way, zigzagging that way, and your actual trajectory onto site should kind of look like a zigzag across the site site because you're specifically clearing all these angles and making sure that if there's an enemy there, you're ready to fight them. But another thing that's incredibly common and powerful in this meta is the idea of post-plant spamming, because there's some compositions that are just so good when they could just play off site, right? Especially like on maps like Abyss, where if you have characters like Gecko getting the plant down and then your team could just play post-plant, and because you have so much utility, as long as you calm it, you make sure that you're not doubling up on utility when you don't need to, you can basically force the enemy off the spike the entire time. So they have no choice but to play really aggressive, and you're ready for that play. So you just put enemies in a really, really bad situation where they have to constantly be challenging you, or they have to be retaking the site really, really quickly. And if they do that, there's gaps in it, like if they're not using any utility to come take the aggressive angles in the site, or opportunities for a deposit play where like 4 of you play post plant and 1 of you plays up in an aggressive angle. So if enemies don't use enough utility to take the front ends of site, that person will be able to get kills, get multiple kills, and mess up and delay. So there's a lot of ways that this could be super strong, and you just got to make sure that you're playing with this intent. Communication about your utility, planting that spike, and not pushing and being aggressive and taking more and more space, just planting and backing the heck out, getting out and playing post plant. Now, Astra did recently get a buff and it's pretty strong, and I think a lot of people are sleeping on Astra right now. She's incredibly powerful. However, Astra is a character that really wants synergy, and I would really suggest if you're gonna play Astra, play her in a duo and try to synergize with pieces of utility. Astra and Raze is incredibly powerful. Being able to do a lot of these suck nade plays or just aggressive plays in general, Astra is great with that communication, but can be a lot more difficult to get value out of than other controllers if you're playing solo queue. So even though she's strong, keep in mind that even when Astra was super strong, she rarely saw consistent play in ranked play. So unless you got that communication line there, it's gonna be hard to get value out of her. Another thing that you should consider about duo versus solo queue, I find too many people are duoing, and they're duoing just so that they have another reliable person on their team, but they're not synergizing, communicating, or playing off each other. If you are duo queuing and always playing on opposite sites, you're not really utilizing the potential that you could otherwise. It's really great if you can synergize, peek off each other, use each other's utility, and rely on each other in the plays that you're making throughout the round. Don't duo simply just to have someone that you trust on your team, because yeah, that's great, but trust them and then synergize with them and communicate with them, and I promise you're gonna win a lot more. Now, one of the most important things, if you want to succeed in climb, you need the right mindset, the competitive mindset. And the mindset is not to necessarily win every single game. I mean, we love winning, of course, but the idea is that every game you take something from it. The idea is that every time you queue up, you're gonna be just a little bit better. But way too many people allow themselves to get tilted, frustrated, play the blame game, and not actually push themselves further. Even in a game where you felt like you did extremely well but didn't win, and you felt like some teammates let you down, I promise you, it's gonna happen no matter what rank you're in. But if you could find something to focus on that you feel like could better yourself, better your play, I would focus on that and go into the next game with one thing to focus on, work on, or get better in, because that's the only way that you're gonna be able to progress. Now, the last one can be something that if you're feeling like you're in a rut, or you're inconsistent, or you're not progressing, I need you to actually just take a break sometimes. I know that it feels like every moment should be spent grinding the game, but some of my biggest wins or my biggest times where I've progressed as a gamer in any game are the times that I took a step back, really kind of relaxed, and allowed some of the things that I learned to sink in, and then I come back in with a fresh mind, a fresh mindset, and with the actual desire to play, and not just the desire to climb or become good at all costs, because I think that's a toxic mindset that actually can hold you back and lead to burnout more than anything else. But if you learned anything in this video, definitely let us know down below, and if you have any questions, also let us know. But before we wrap this up, let me tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that. Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really works. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. We add new courses every month with over 1,000 guides curated into 50 courses no one can compare. We also have a direct line of communication with subscribers in our Discord so that you can get connected immediately to some of the best players in the game who will respond to any and all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that's going to be all for this one today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.